So back in June of 2021, I had moved, and while driving, we went through Wisconsin. I can't really remember the town or anything, so sorry for that, but it was around 2 or 3 in the morning. We had stopped to try and get gas, but when we got into one town, it was like a ghost town. Absolutely no cars or anything, and while yes, it was pretty early, keep in mind we had seen cars all up until this point. But regardless, we noticed the gas station and it was lit up. All the lights on inside. An open light glowing and everything. Yet when we got closer and tried going in the doors, were locked. And we even went around the back looking for a car and nothing. Not to mention all the gas pumps said, out of order. We got back in the car, not really thinking anything of it. Until we found another gas station maybe a block away, and I'm not even joking when I say the exact same thing happened. So by now, I was a bit put off, but I wasn't about to convince myself we entered some weird wormhole until it appeared a third time. At this point, I didn't even want to get out of the car, but I needed to stretch my legs. When I did get out though, and my friend who was driving went to try the doors, yet nothing. When he was on his way back to the car, there was a blood-curdling scream. It genuinely made me sick to my stomach, and keep in mind it was so fucking quiet up to this point. But we made our way out of there as fast as we could and didn't see any cars again until we got back on a highway. And after that, after getting settled in my apartment, me and my roommates just didn't feel well. When I was unpacking with one of them, something fell twice and we still don't know what did. A few days later, my other roommate had said she felt like there was something in the apartment, and I felt it too. Granted, I am a paranoid person by default, so I don't know what the fuck to call this. It was just a weird experience and a great story to tell. I'd love to hear if any of you have any input on it. I broke a lease to get out of this apartment, but I'd love thoughts on what you all think was in or wrong with the apartment I lived in. About a month in, I started waking up at 3 a.m. every night. I would feel something off and never ever leave my bedroom. I never closed my door, but in that place I did. Thankfully, there was a bathroom connected. Half of the time I would hear voices in the living room and or literal horror music coming from there. Sometimes it would sound like everything in my closet collapsed, loudly crashing, to find nothing in the morning. Yeah, no, I'm not opening my closet doors in the middle of the night. I would get in the shower and come back to find white powder, cornstarch from my cupboards, all over the counter. But I lived alone. Sometimes the keys to my bathrooms would be removed from the top of the doors and set in a perfect line in the middle of the carpet, 6 feet from the door. One time, I came home from work in the middle of the day and felt sick dread as soon as I walked in. Like someone was in my apartment. I searched everywhere and found nothing. I went out to the balcony to calm my nerves. When I walked back in, I saw a flickering blue transparent projection of a man with no eyes, greasy hair, blood on his shirt. Never saw him again, but I noped it out of my apartment for the rest of the day. Now, to the shadow man. I lived on the second floor and would sit out on my balcony in the evenings. There was an identical apartment building across the way from me, just on the other side of a small creek. The blinds to the apartment bedrooms that mirrored mine were always closed. Every night upon darkness settling, a light would go on in the room that would have been their master bedroom. A floating black shadow in the shape of a man would appear. Sometimes it would wisp away and wisp instantly back in the left or right corner. Sometimes it would grow larger and larger. Sometimes it had a hat, and sometimes it grew wings. But it watched me. I couldn't help but look. If I had company, it was gone. Once, I had someone spend the night. He said he woke up at 3 a.m. feeling an intense need to look out my window, but he knew about the shadow man and didn't. The sliding door blinds were always open. The kitchen lights were always on, but I only saw someone in there twice the entire time I lived there. I would see a very old man wearing a robe. The first time, it was like I was watching a fast-forward film. He was prepping food, but moving so fast, his arms were a blur. The second time, I saw him float in fast forward from the kitchen to the bedroom. There were 2 bedroom blinds to that unit. The blinds were always closed. Sometimes in the morning, they would flick open and close simultaneously, looking like eyes blinking. Now, these were 2 separate apartment buildings. I looked up murders and crimes in the area and never found a thing. Any thoughts on what could have been going on? I've wondered ever since, although I'm beyond elated to not be living there anymore, for obvious reasons. We Muslims refer to what Christians call demons as jinn. They're one of the 3 intelligent creations of God, the other 2 being humans and angels. The jinn were created from smokeless fire. Some suspect this means electricity or other electromagnetic property. Humans were created from clay, carbon and water. Angels from light or photons. Humans and jinn enjoy the right to free will. The angels are restricted to the obedience of God. Some jinn are good, some are pure evil, but most are kind of in the middle. In Arabic, the evil ones are called shayateen, plural, shaitan, singular. So in English, jinn translates to demons. Shaitan translates to Satan or devil. Iblis/Lucifer is important to the story of jinn because he leads all the purely evil shayateen. He was not the original jinn, but he was the best in worship of God from the jinn, and he held a high position due to his devotion. However, when God announced the creation of Adam as his best creation, he grew jealous and arrogant. He felt man was an inferior creation and that his worship of God for thousands of years was evidence of that. God, being the creator of everyone and everything, told Iblis that he had transgressed all limits and would be sent to hell. He asked for a reprieve before his sentence so that he could prove to him how easily he can cause mankind to be led off the path of worship of God. God granted it to him. The forbidden apple was bit. Adam and Eve were sent to earth. You know the story. And so here we are. So back to the jinn. They existed far before humanity ever arrived on earth, and they were great in numbers. But alas, they couldn't get along and had great wars among each other. This caused all kinds of destruction to Earth, and as a consequence, their populations dwindled and humanity flourished. They ended up establishing small tribes across the remote regions of Earth. As already mentioned, not all jinn and demons are necessarily evil. They practice many of the same faiths practiced by humans. They have organized societies where they dole out justice. This is one of the reasons why they rarely kill humans. There are severe repercussions, including capital punishment. When you do have a problem with them, call on God for protection. No matter what faith the jinn practices, it will back off. This is confirmed by exorcists of many faiths. Among their tribes, they have different levels of powers. Some can fly, while others can shapeshift, imitate human voices, and some of the more powerful ones, called Ilfrit, are able to travel at the speed of light. Most, if not all, the paranormal phenomena we read about, ghosts, orbs, spirits, skinwalkers, dogman, Sasquatch, Muslims for the most part consider them all to be from the same form or another of jinn. Other tidbits about jinn. There are several classes of jinn, each with their own degrees of indifference or hostility towards humans. They cannot be seen in their original form. Whatever we see is whatever form they've taken on. One of the more common types of jinn, called hin, takes on the shape of a snake, black wolf-like creatures or other animals. Some of them are thought to consume bones, feces or rotting flesh for sustenance. It's suspected that this is the reason for the foul odour experienced by people when they encounter or feel the presence of them. There's a misconception that you hear often about how jinn reside in the Middle East or the Eastern Hemisphere. They're everywhere. Again, they simply go by different names depending on the culture. They're reclusive and territorial creatures and prefer to be left alone. They're likely to live in remote regions like forests, deserts, and oceans. You can even find them in uninhibited attics, caves, or burrows. Another place they dwell in are bathrooms. Remember that feces bit? If you encroach on their territory, you'll run into problems. They mostly tend to be mischievous in nature and enjoy spooking humans to get them to leave their dwellings. Some of the truly evil ones will scratch humans or possess humans, but the most rare and dangerous ones are called ghouls. They'll cause humans to get lost in deserts or forests, leading to their deaths. Muslims believe that the witches use certain types of jinn to do seemingly miraculous or malevolent activities for their bidding. During the era of Prophet Solomon, witchcraft and magic had become rampant among his civilization, so much so that it became a real nightmare for his people. So to solve this, a covenant was made by him and leaders of the jinn that they will not interfere with affairs of mankind. Despite that, there's some who will not heed the terms of that agreement. Oftentimes, a Muslim exorcist will remind the offending jinn of the agreement made with them. Muslim scholars will advise to exhaust all natural explanations before performing exorcisms or cleansing of a home. Do not use violence against them, as you can give them a reason to do the same to you. Always invoke or call on God to protect you from any kind of interaction with them. So when I was in high school, I had a bedroom in the basement, and it was absolutely full of aquariums. One in particular, the biggest one, was 100 grams and situated with its short side right next to my head on the bed, like where a night table would be. Within this aquarium were my beloved two red parrot cichlids, Moby and Eleanor. Every night, they would sleep together in a big terracotta flower pot on its side. The pot was on the end farthest from my bed, and in the morning, when it was light, they would greet me by staring at my head on the pillow on the opposite end. They were very intelligent and would follow you around the room, and when in front of the tank, they'd be right there looking back at you. One night, I'm not sure what it was, but something woke me up. I was facing the fish tank, and my eyes fixated on the flower pot that they slept in, to which was vacant. Weird, I thought, because they slept all night in that thing. Then I started looking up higher in the water column, and they were both in the center of the tank, looking out the front like they do when you stand there. So I leant up to see what it was they were looking at, only to find a man, clear as day on his knees in front of the tank, staring back at them. Groggy and yet thinking straight, mildly terrified, I uttered, "Who are you?" Which, to be honest, is not what I ever thought I'd have to say in a situation like that, but alas. As the words left my mouth, he snapped his head towards me with wide eyes. I remember his face perfectly. He was a young man I'd never seen before, with short curly hair. My fear finally kicked in when he snapped his gaze in my direction, and I leapt backwards, sticking my arm out behind me and grabbing the cord to my lamp with one of those cord switches and flicking it on. As soon as the light came on, he was gone. With the light on and the man gone, Moby and Eleanor swam over to the side of the tank closest to my pillow. I looked at them and the blank space where the man was. I couldn't figure out what had just happened and sat in bed with the light on all night. I want to start off by saying this isn't super creepy, more odd. My boyfriend's grandfather recently passed away unexpectedly. He fell and had a severe brain bleed. Due to his age and other factors, the best choice was not to perform the surgery required to repair the bleed. His daughter, my boyfriend's grandfather's, and I were at his home yesterday, cleaning everything up and getting everything organised. We took a break and decided to make some lunch. We needed a can opener. Now, this man has absolutely everything and anything. He's lived there for the last 25 years. Not to mention, he pretty much lived off tuna sandwiches. So why wouldn't he have a freaking can opener, right? When I tell you that we looked through everything, I mean we looked through absolutely everything. No can opener. She ended up running down to the local store and purchased one. A bright red one. Fast forward a couple of hours, I was washing the dishes. there was a black can opener just sitting right there in plain sight on the counter. There's absolutely no way we didn't see it there. Not one. There was literally nothing on the counter prior to our dirty dishes after we ate. We laughed it off. You could hear him saying, "It's right here, dumbasses," as he slammed it down on the counter. It's so wild though, because we both said it. His home felt so empty, just like void. His wife has severe dementia, and I don't believe that he was ready to pass on. I could get into all of that, but that's a whole different story. I thought for sure that his spirit might stay behind, at least until she passes on. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he did truly pass on. I don't know, either way. This whole situation was just weird and unexplainable. When I turned 18, I moved into my girlfriend's house with her family. I used to stay the night and things would fall off the shelves, and I was told stories about the house. I've been living there around a month when all this started happening. Me and my girlfriend used to share a full-size bed. It was a fairly small room, and the bed was facing our closet. Like I said, all of this happened about a month after I turned 18, so in May, right before graduation. We were sleeping one night, and out of nowhere, around 2 or 3 a.m., I heard someone calling my name right from the closet. At first I thought it was her sister making a joke. I went to the closet and nobody was there. Fast forward a couple nights, about 2 days after graduating, I heard the same thing. I started to worry and I brushed off and decided to tell my girlfriend in the morning. But a couple hours later, my girlfriend sits up and starts talking, but she won't stop staring at the closet. It's good to know that she does talk in her sleep and sleepwalks from time to time, but this time she was having a full-blown conversation with what it seemed like someone in the closet. She swears to this day that she doesn't remember doing that. I've recently moved out of my childhood home. My grandfather and sisters still live there. When I was around 11 or 12, I had an experience I'll never forget. I had my cousin over for the weekend. It was around 11 p.m. Me and my cousin were watching television in the living room. For reference, the front of our house used to be full of glass and plastic-like windows. We had a couch along the windows and an armchair right next to it. We were watching TV and all of a sudden, we heard something in the front yard. As we went to look, through the little space between the couch and chair, we saw 4 men wearing all black, standing in line in the middle of our front yard. We got freaked out and ran to my grandfather's room and had him come look. To our surprise, when he came and looked outside, nothing. He told us it was our mind playing tricks on us and for us to just watch TV. Around 15 minutes after he went to bed, we heard it again. With us being curious and this confirming that we weren't just imagining, it looked again. There they were, just standing there, but this time closer to the front of the house than before. We sat there watching them with a blanket over our heads. After about 5 minutes, one of the men seemed to spot us and looked and pointed at us. He put his finger up to his mouth and told us to shh. Shortly after, the man closest to our car, to the right of us, ran up. He squared right by the window we were at and started tapping on the window. We couldn't see his face, or any of their faces for that matter. They were just pitch black faces. My cousin started screaming and ran to my grandpa, but I was determined to stay and watch them until they came back. When he started coming down the hallway, they just vanished, like they were never there. I don't know what these men were. I never saw them again. My grandfather didn't have an explanation for it either, but he believes us. Since I could remember, my grandfather, who adopted me and my sisters, used to tell me about the old man John, who used to live in our house before it burnt down. One night, his granddaughter stayed the night with him and his wife. Unfortunately, there was a gas leak, and the grandfather and granddaughter died. The grandmother was at work. From the earliest time I could remember, there's always been things happening in this house. From TVs turning on for no reason, or channel switching when we're watching something, to the washer and dryer turning on. Nothing too big. I was always told that they're not there to hurt me. They're just living by themselves and we have to share. One of the weirdest times I could remember is right before I knew about the pair. I had my friend come stay the night with me. At the time, I shared a room with my two younger sisters. I want to say I was around 10 years old. At the time, we had bunk beds. Me and my friend were on the top and my two sisters were at the bottom. It all started around 10 p.m. My sisters went to bed around 7:30 p.m. at the time. Me and my friend heard a little girl laughing and we were confused because my sisters should have been asleep by now. We leaned over the bunk bed to see why they were awake. Both of my sisters were dead asleep. Needless to say, we were freaked out. We then heard the TV turn on the living room. My grandfather was asleep as well. Our living room was right down the hall, so light from the television lights up the hallway. Not even 2 minutes later, we saw a shadow of a little girl, roughly 7 years old. We yelled for my grandfather. He went to check. As we went into the living room, we could see a figure of a man sitting in the chair in front of the television. This is a story I have from our family cabin in the woods. I'm keeping the exact location of the cabin concealed, as 3 different families own it and the property aside from mine, and some of them really try hard to keep this place a secret, even though the river behind the cabin is a popular kayaking destination. The cabin is situated in the middle of the woods, about a half-mile drive from the road, with the only entrance by car being the half-mile dirt driveway. This was an experience that my father had at least 10 years ago. I'm going to write it from his perspective to keep as much as what he wrote intact. His name is Tom. The cabin is 101 years old. It can sleep 20 guests and host parties many times that number. There's a large kitchen that can feed armies of people. There are few internal walls, no ceilings, no central heat. It's rustic. It was meant as a hunting and fishing lodge and to be used in the summer for family vacations. The central room in the lodge is a huge living room. The living room is surrounded by screened porches. These porches are where everyone eats and sleeps. There are windows in the main room that are closed in the evening to shut the room up from the outside weather. A normal evening, a fire is lit in the large fireplace and maintained until late into the evening. The room is surrounded by deer heads with the granddaddy himself, the elk positioned above the fireplace. His huge rack of antlers went all the way to the top of the roof, his imposing eyes watching everything that happens in the great room. The living room is the centerpiece of the lodge, with its many sitting arrangements, card table, piano, and 2 fireplaces. It's the place to gather in the evening. Parties just naturally happen after summer. It starts with the younger kids playing games and the adults talking near the fire. Later, when the kids have gone to bed, the adult parties start. They roar many times into the wee hours of the morning. It's not uncommon for a few never-say-die partiers to walk down the driveway to watch the sun rise. A real shock happened when the current owners, 4 families, met one year to conduct our first owners meeting. Over the years, our cabin had been handed down through the families, and its ownership had grown. The families had grown so large that each group used the place for just immediate family. The older generation of owners never met as a group. The families had grown apart and communication had pretty much stopped. One night, sitting in front of the fireplace, the talk came around to weird happenings in the lodge. We were all shocked and fascinated to hear that each family had similar stories and occurrences. The 4 of us had all heard the screen door open and close by itself. We all knew people who had seen and felt the sleeping porch ghosts. Whatever lingering doubts about the veracity of the stories evaporated in a bone-chilling shock. What happened to one family was happening to the others. These stories weren't made up. They were, in fact, real. Inevitably, the discussion turned to the living room. Although there were stories of strange occurrences in different parts of the lodge and even in the surrounding property, the living room remained the principal focal point. It was in this room that things were seen or heard more often. It was also the place where the happenings were the most intense. The piano playing itself, the old man in the chair, and of course, the party were all common occurrences for all the groups that came and stayed in the cabin. The party has a special place in everyone's experience at our cabin. All the families have heard it, and the way it happens is very consistent. It starts when the last person has gone to bed, and the lights are out throughout the building. It most often starts at 3 or 4 a.m. The party has some very distinctive aspects that everyone that has heard it agree on. You can hear people talking, but you cannot make out the words. Many hear music, but cannot discern any melody. You hear laughing, but you can't pick out one single laugh. It's a blended background noise with no individual parts. When I first heard the party, I was sleeping on the back porch that overlooks the creek. We had over 20 people staying the night, so I, being one of the non-married males, was relegated to the couch at the dark end of the porch. The couch was located under one of the windows that looked directly into the living room. My head on the pillow was just under the sill. To see into the room, all I needed to do was prop up on my elbows. As I lay down, I could clearly see that the living room was dark. Everyone was in bed. I'd been sleeping for a couple of hours when I was awakened by the noise of a raucous party in the living room. It was a combination of laughter, muted voices, the general hubbub of people moving around and celebrating. In a foggy state of mind, having just awakened, I thought to myself, they're still up. As I lay there with my eyes closed, I slowly woke up fully. Now coming to my full senses, I remembered that I was one of the last people to leave the living room. I turned out the lights in the room. A second thought popped into my mind. They all got back up and continued the party? What would drive people to get back out of bed in the middle of the night and start a party? Crazy as it sounded, it had to be the answer. With that, I sat up in bed and looked through the window, expecting to see my friends in full party mode. Totally black. Not a light on in the room. Not a single sound coming from the other side of the window. As soon as I sat up, the sound had abruptly stopped. It was as if a switch had cut all the sound instantly. I sat there in a daze. A peculiar feeling of I shouldn't be here ran through me. A feeling of dread and fear was also starting to build up in me. I had no desire to get up and investigate. I had the distinct feeling I shouldn't enter the room. The unnatural feeling that I didn't want was overwhelming. Another night, years later, however, I decided to sleep in the living room on one occasion. I'd never heard of any stories of people experiencing the party when sleeping in the room itself, mostly because I thought the room was cut off from the white noise effect of the falls in the background. Trying to sleep, I laid down on a blow-up mattress in front of the fireplace. Every time I found myself drifting off to sleep, the party would erupt all around me. I sprang out of my covers, only to find the entire room still black as night, with all the sound I heard gone. This happened countless times afterwards. Finally, getting so fed up with it and exhaustion kicking in, I decided to let the party continue, even if I heard it. I was just going to keep my eyes closed and try to sleep through the noise. I closed my eyes and was drifting back to sleep when, like clockwork, the party started up again. Determined to just sleep through it, I rolled over and held the covers over my head, as I tried my best to simply ignore the revelries. All of a sudden, I felt a hand on my arm and heard a voice clear as day say to me, "Tom!" I shot right out of my mattress, only to find an empty, dark room, like always. I knew who was trying to wake me up. The voice that spoke my name and put their hand on my arm was my best friend, Chuck. We always came to the deer camp early together, a good friend that I've known since 7th grade. A friend that I spent countless days hiking at the cabin. A man that has been coming to the cabin since he was a boy. The same friend that told me that the happiest days of his life were when he was up at the property. I couldn't think of time that he wasn't there with me. He never missed a deer hunt or a Labour Day party. A man that loved this cabin as much or more than the owners. And a man that had been dead for 4 years. His calling my name and grabbing my arm was a message. I didn't belong here. This is a party that I wasn't invited to. Yet. Our cabin in the woods was originally built in 1919, after an earlier cabin had burned down. It's situated on a black water river, overlooking a 4.5 to 5 foot waterfall. Our family's been going to the cabin every summer, since at least the day that my father was born in 1959. One of the traditions we've always had is lounging down by the river on those hot summer days. On one of those days, something strange happened that my father could never explain. After a while in the sun, my father was tasked with going up to the cabin and retrieving drinks for the rest of the friends and family that were gathered in beach chairs, not far at all downstream from the falls. He started walking back from the beach, making his way up the landing to head up to the cabin. A total round trip from the location on the beach to the kitchen in the cabin, without preparing drinks, takes about 3 minutes. There's a landing before walking the rest of the stairs up to what we call the back porch of the cabin. As he reached this first landing, he was surprised to find a gentleman standing at the far end, up against the wood railing, looking down towards the falls. Now, this is concerning. This is private property. For him to have made it this far onto the property without being seen meant he had to have walked all the way around the cabin. While everyone was down at the beach, this guy could have robbed everyone blind. But at the same time, it's not unusual to see visitors show up from time to time. The cabin/lodge had been around since 1919, so my father approached the man asking, "Can I help you?" The man, still staring at the constant rush of water, replied, "No, I just want to see the falls." As my father got closer, he noticed that the man was fairly tall and lean, and had on what you'd call working pants, and a cotton work shirt. It came across to my father as very old-fashioned. My father asked him, "Have you been here before?" "Yes," he replied. "Many times." This was the second time he replied to the inquiries without looking at my father. He continued, "I worked at the sawmill up the river." "I lost my hand at the mill," the man said, all while continuing to gaze at the falls unabated. There was an old mill up the river that had burned down a long time ago. My father didn't think it was a sawmill, but he just assumed the man was talking about a different one. The man entertained my father with stories about his time at the mill, coming down the river and enjoying the scenery. More and more, my father was getting the sense that this wasn't a conversation, so much as it was just listening to the old man reminisce about his past. He was avoiding answering any of my father's questions. Suddenly, he stopped talking, turned around and began climbing the 80 or so steps back up to the back porch of the cabin. My father decided to turn back towards the beach and inform everybody about the fascinating encounter with this gentleman. Upon arriving back at the party on the beach, everyone exclaimed, "Where are the drinks?" Slightly confused by their question, he responded that he'd been talking with this older man up on the landing. The landing is clearly visible from the beach, so people at the party must have seen him talking to him. My father was flustered that nobody admitted to seeing him on the landing, talking with this man for what he felt was possibly 30 minutes or more. One of his good friends refuted this and said he had only been gone for no more than 5 minutes. After failing to convince anyone about where he was or the duration of the conversation, he decided to bite his tongue and return to the cabin with the drinks everyone had been asking for. Here's where things get a little weird. First, it wasn't until after he went the second time to go fetch drinks that he realised he didn't walk the stranger out to the driveway. This man was clearly trespassing, but yet my father didn't think twice about letting him walk back from whence he came by himself. Coming back up to the cabin only 5 or so minutes after leaving the man, there was no trace that he had ever been there, and he was not walking down the driveway out back to the road. Second, after the summer trip had concluded, my father did some research on the stories that the old man was telling. The sawmill the gentleman had discussed indeed existed. Reading through some history, he found that there was only one sawmill that ever existed on the river. It ceased being a sawmill when it was converted into a grist mill in 1886. The man clearly said that he lost his hand while working at this sawmill. Thinking through everything, at the very earliest, that would have made this man 118 years old in 1985. There was no way a 118-year-old would have been able to make it down that rock landing by themselves. And furthermore, he certainly didn't look 118. So to this day, my father affirms that who he conversed with on the landing above the falls was a ghost. I'm not even sure how long the piano has been in the cabin in the living room. It's been there for as long as I can remember. It sits in the southwest corner of the room, up against the windows to the front porch. The piano has, to my knowledge, never been restrung or tuned in the years that I've been up there. Even though there were few people who really played it, there were kids who liked to bang on the keys every now and then. So it was apparent to everyone how bad the sounds were getting every year. The keys were out of tune and few of them stopped playing notes together. Now I can tell you, members of my family are not what you'd call musically gifted. Therefore nobody attempts to play it, ever. But there was one person in our family who did. My mother. In 2014, she died at the venerable age of 89. Marrying my father, who was one of the owning families of the property, her first opportunity to play the relic would have been sometime in the 1940s. And I vaguely remember her telling us how she'd be the one to liven up the parties, as nobody could play it like she could. In her later years, she had stopped coming up to the cabin because it had become too difficult to move around in a place that was, in no way, handicap accessible. It's quite fascinating. In all of the years from college onwards, she and my father never owned a piano at home. She learned how to play from her father, but really had stopped playing daily by the time I left for university. But make no mistake about it, she was good. It was during the day that a friend and I were walking up the steps from the river around the side of the cabin. We were talking about guns and fishing as we normally did while rounding the side of the cabin, and were now walking on the short path in front of the front porch. At that moment, we could hear the distinct sound of someone playing the piano in the living room. And this was no ordinary banging on the keys, this was someone actually playing the piano. A song even. Neither he nor I are musically inclined, and even read on piano for that matter. So the tune was unfamiliar to us. But nevertheless, it was impressive. There was only one other person in the cabin that weekend, and that was my brother. As soon as we got close to the front door to let ourselves in, I noticed the music had ceased playing. I didn't think this was strange at the time, because I believed my brother was the one who was orchestrating the melody, or at least playing something loud on a radio he had brought. However, entering through the front door, I was surprised to find that my brother was sitting at the dining table, which is almost at the opposite side of the cabin where the piano is situated. He was reading a newspaper or doing the crossword puzzle, when my friend and I walked up to him. "That's some nice playing you did there," I said to him, slapping him on the back as he was facing the screens that surround the porches, dining area and beds. He winced and gave me a quizzical look and promptly told me he didn't know what I was talking about. "The piano? We heard you playing, or was that just your radio turned up really loud?" I asked him in jest, truly knowing that he didn't have a single musical fibre in his body to be able to play something that extravagant. "I didn't bring my radio," he sharply replied. "What music?" My friend and I turned to each other as I had just gotten goosebumps down my back and arms after hearing him say that. "Well then, I believe we just heard the piano play by itself then," I told both of them. Later that weekend, all three of us were walking in, almost the exact same spot as when my friend and I heard the piano start playing, when a familiar sound caught us off guard. All three of us now, without a doubt, standing next to each other, heard the piano hammering out a tune once more. This time though, my brother and I recognised the melody. The song that was playing was unmistakably an original song that our mother had written and played herself. She would play the song every time she'd come to the cabin. Nobody knew that song except for my father, who's deceased as well, my brother and me, and maybe a few of our relatives. A chill ran down our spines as we stood there and listened. After a while, the music stopped. The piano keys fell silent, and the familiar sound of crickets and other fauna filled the void. My brother and I rushed into the cabin, thinking we might catch a glimpse of the performer who may still have been sitting on the wooden bench in front of the piano. But to no one's surprise, the piano bench was vacant, and the ragged army green tarp that had always laid over it was still sheltering the piano. My brother and I shared a rare sentimental moment, knowing that there was only one person in the world who knew that song well enough to play it. That night, as I was falling asleep, it choked me up thinking about all of the good memories I had when she played that song up here. The next morning, which was also the day we were packing up to head home, my brother and I decided to roll back the worn tarp and play a few notes on the piano, just to see if anybody had tuned or otherwise improved its performance. And as always, it only played on some keys, and the ones that did play, barely in tune. Not a lot of people knew this, but the wooden bench that the piano player would sit on to perform opened up. In this cavity were countless unsorted pages of arrangements with various difficulties ranging from Piano 101 to Beethoven. As I was inspecting the backside of the piano, my brother had opened the bench's cavity. He noticed that one of the pages on top of most of the pile was a handwritten piece. Pulling it out, he instantly recognized the handwriting as that of our mothers. It was the handwritten sheet music we didn't know existed of the ballad we heard the day before. A couple of years back when I was a teen, I was driving up a canyon out of Duchesne, a small town in Utah. It was the middle of the day, the sun was out, and there were only spotty clouds. The road I was using was pretty isolated, but not totally out of the way. Every once in a while, I would pass an oil rig off the side of the road, and occasionally a small house or a couple of cows would be a little further back from where I was driving. There weren't any trees blocking my line of sight, and any shrubbery was either just scraggly juniper bushes or grass that would barely reach past your ankles. Again, Utah. I was enjoying the drive a lot, because for me, driving time is me time. I was looking around, taking in the scenery, and I saw something to my right. About 75 feet back, standing near an oil rig, was a person. At first I didn't think anything of it. There have to be people to occasionally maintain an oil rig, but then I looked closer, and what I saw was anything but human. It had 2 legs and 2 arms, but that's where the differences stopped. It looked like it was made out of black scribbles, like if you took a pen and randomly scribbled across a sheet of paper. In between the black scribbles was stark white. I couldn't see anything through the creature. Its arms were long enough to reach the mid-calf, and it didn't quite have normal hands. Instead, it looked like branches twisting off the main trunk of its arms. It didn't really have a head or a neck. Instead, it sort of just had a slight hump rising from the top of its torso. At the front of the hump, it had eyes of a sort, but it was more like 2 blank spots where the scribbles didn't cross, leaving 2 blank white circles. It was hunched over, but even then I could tell it was big. It reached about 1/3 of the way up the oil rig. I saw this thing in pure daylight. I wasn't sleepy, and I'd only been on the road for about an hour and a half before I saw that thing. I made complete eye contact with it, but it didn't necessarily make me feel scared, just uneasy. Has anyone else seen anything like this? Or did teen me just have a split-second flash of insanity? As a child, I had a lot of things happen to me. My grandmother's house was the most haunted house I've ever been to, but I also had experiences at my own house and my friend's house. My grandmother's house is 2 stories. It had the basement and the upstairs. The basement creeped me out so bad that I would refuse to go down there without someone going with me. Nothing really ever happened down there besides the feeling that someone is watching you. The upstairs is where everything happened. The creepiest thing to ever happen while being there was when I was around 9 or 10. My dad worked night shift, so my grandmother had to get him off of work, so my sister and I were the only people in the house. We had woke up around 4 a.m. because my grandmother told us she was leaving, and after she left, we decided to watch TV. We were about to go back to sleep when we heard something in the hallway. We both looked, and we saw a woman being dragged down the hallway. She had her mouth open, but nothing was coming out. We kept looking in the hallway, shocked at what we had just seen. We didn't go back to sleep that night. We waited till the sun came up and went into our grandmother's room. We told her what happened, but she didn't believe us. A few years went by when my sister and my father moved into a townhome. Multiple things happened here. My father, my sister and I all have experiences here. The scariest moment that happened to me when I was maybe 14. I had my friend stay over. She kept saying that she was seeing things and that she was creeped out. About an hour after, she had said that she wanted to go home. My sister and I went to walk her home since she lived just down the street, when once as we went to leave we heard what sounded like a dresser was knocked over. At the time, there were no neighbours living next to us. We run to her house, and my sister and I stay at her house until my dad got back from work. We would also hear people going up and down the stairs. I would hear knocking in the basement. My sister saw a black figure standing over her mom when she came to visit for a few days. Her mom had also seen a black figure with red eyes walk past the bedroom door. Just a super creepy place. I had an experience at my best friend's house. We were in her room laying down watching TV when we heard someone walking up the steps. Her mom was out on a business trip and her dad was working the night shift, and there's nobody else that lives there. I wouldn't go into the house by myself. Whatever presence there was incredibly heavy. I would feel it in my chest, and my heart would start racing. We would constantly see stuff at the corner of your eye. We'd be sitting watching TV downstairs, and right next to the TV was where you'd go upstairs, and right at the top of the stairs is the bathroom. And when the light in the bathroom was on, we would see shadows go across the hallway. Just very creepy. There was also the usual feeling of being watched. I wasn't very upset by May's death. I was still processing. I didn't know her that well. Everyone in that Discord server was sending her messages and just being sad. After 2 days, the weirdest possible thing happened. She sent a message in the server which was, "Did something happen here? Why is my name deceased?" Since I was the first one to see it, I was rightfully confused. Then her boyfriend, let's call her boyfriend Danny, saw it. He was confused. Then more people got online. Everyone was saying and asking different things. Danny lied about May dying? Or, the fuck kind of prank is this? And more stuff like that. After those people went offline to process, me, Danny and May started trying to figure out what's going on. At this point, Danny was more yelling at May to stop pranking him and to get off his May's account. So I took this time to message her and ask her some questions. She said the last thing she remembered was being in the car with her mom while talking to Danny on the phone. Then suddenly everything went black and she was in a state similar to sleep paralysis. She couldn't see anything. She didn't tell me if she could move or not. Then she woke up in her bed. It had felt like a few hours to her, but she now knows it was 2 days. May thought she had just passed out and went to tell Danny. That's when she saw all the messages people sent, basically telling her she was dead. That's, the rest of what happened. After that, let's skip to the present. About an hour later, we were mostly testing out what she could do. She can eat. She can't taste. She said she felt some pain after she pinched herself, then she tried opening a window. She said before she couldn't get outside and all of the outside was white. And she was able to open it but not get outside. We went back to texting about what was going on. And then she texted she could see stuff outside. She could see houses, none of which are houses she actually lives next to. Then May said something surprising. She said she could see her dead friend's house. She became really sad and we kind of changed the subject. The conversation ended a few minutes later. This happened in 2003, 2004, but something I've never been able to forget or explain. Long story to explain it all. For context, I'm South African, and crime is unfortunately a problem. Hijacking is common. It was my mum's birthday, and she and my dad went out for dinner without the kids. I was 17 and perfectly capable of looking after my sister, 14, and brother, 10. Later that night, I heard our electric gate open and assumed my parents were home. No car came down the driveway, so I thought I must have heard wrong. What I didn't know is that while my parents were waiting for the gate to open, 3 weaponed men stood next to the car. They shoved both my parents into the boot of my dad's car and drove off with my dad's in a separate getaway car to find an ATM. Not satisfied with the cash, they headed back to our home to collect whatever valuables we have. The second time around, I heard the gate again and also heard the car enter the driveway and stop. Now, the driveway runs along the side of our home, and there's a window from our dining room from where you can see the driveway and gate. Myself and my 2 siblings were watching TV in the living room right next to the dining room. I heard someone knock on the dining room window and thought maybe my mom or dad got out of the car and wants me to do something, like get a dog that ran outside or whatever. I went to the window and saw nothing at the window, but down the driveway was my dad's car and another car I didn't recognize. My dad was missing, and my mom was sitting next to a stranger who was driving the car. She was looking down and looked petrified. She must have seen some movement from the window or something in that second and motioned for me to call. I immediately knew what was going on and told my siblings to make sure everything was locked, and I ran to call the police. Long story short, the hijackers saw me in the window and knew I had seen them, and the electric gate started closing. They panicked and fled in the getaway car. By the way, Dad was still in the boot. Later, after the police had taken our statements, my mum asked me why I went to that window, because it's kind of random. I told her I heard someone knock on the window and she was dumbfounded. She said there wasn't anything or anyone near that window to knock it. I also know that from inside, no one knocked it. My siblings didn't hear a knock either. My grandmother died earlier that year, and our only thought is that maybe it was her. If not her, then who? The knock saved my family, because my mom said the hijackers were freaked out more when they saw I had seen them, and they knew I was going to call the police. And we sadly know how many such violent situations end. One day between 2018 and 19, my wife and I had a lazy day at our apartment in the Tampa, Florida area. Ordering in lunch and dinner, watching Netflix, partaking in the devil's lettuce. You know, typical money-wasting millennial shit. I was laying in bed looking at the ceiling fan while my wife played a game on her phone. I rolled to my side and tried to gain her attention, but failed. Figuring she was at an important point in the game, I rolled to my other side and started daydreaming. I have 2 pin-sized or needle-sized holes that are visible to me on my body. One on my right temple, the other on my chest near the top of my sternum. Never knew how they got there, just figured it was a birth defect or some shit. Anyway, I was thinking about those holes and what would happen if they got bigger. Maybe I was stoned, okay? And started touching the spots lightly. Suddenly, I saw what I could call a single piece of square metallic confetti slowly descend from the ceiling. It changed colours between silver and black, fell extremely slow, and looked 3-dimensional. I observed from my relative position for about 3 seconds, and the moment I attempted to reposition to get a closer and better look, I was struck by this intense pain in my chest. It felt like a mix between a stab and a cramp. About 2 seconds later, in my right ear, I heard a crippling high-frequency screeching sound. Imagine tinnitus, or like when a microphone is too close to a speaker, but literally crippling. I curled into a ball the moment I felt the chest pain, and then reached in an attempt to cover my right ear as soon as the sound started. It happened for what felt like 4 or 5 seconds, then it completely stopped, instantly. I've been tested before, and it was just like that. It's extremely painful when it's happening, but when it stops, the pain immediately subsides. When it stopped, my body relaxed and I was covered in sweat. I turned to my wife, who was still on her phone, and told her I just about died. She looked at me and said she didn't even feel me roll over. About 7 years ago, during the time I was in college, I was around 20 years old. Highly stressed, being a biology major, I had fallen asleep with my office chair facing me. My desk light was still on. I woke up during sleep paralysis, unable to move my body, and what I saw sitting in my office chair was the most vivid, detailed, and scary creature I've ever seen in my life. I still remember it to this day. The light was still shining in the background. The creature was about 3 to 4 feet tall. It looked like an emaciated old woman. Fragile, grey, pale skin, and very thin skin. Nose was narrow, sharp, and big. The eyes were very black and dark. There were no whites around the eyes. The hair was very brittle, thin, and grey. The hands were old. Thin, bony, long fingers, and the nail was so long, about 1 to 1.5 inches in length. The nails on the foot and hands were not trimmed as if they hadn't been cut. Her ears were pointy and sharp. It looked like an elf. She had a small chin. She wore an old, ragged white dress with cut-out small, triangular patterns. During the sleep paralysis, I stared at it for a good 2 minutes or so. She stared back at me. She didn't go on my chest or anything, and I didn't feel suffocated during the experience. I couldn't scream or move, and the thing never smiled or had any facial reactions. It was just blank and staring at me. What freaked me out after the sleep paralysis experience was that I searched old hag and found other people having a similar experience with the old hag. It was a crazy sleep paralysis experience. I never had this experience again, and I never placed an office chair facing me. I felt like it was an invitation to watch me. It was wicked and gives me goosebumps when I think about it. I just moved into a new apartment about a month ago, and my roommate has been living in the apartment for a few months before I moved in. I took over part of a lease for a friend who had to move out for work, as I was moving to the city for my own career. Since moving in, I've cleansed the apartment, mainly keeping my room cleansed as my roommate isn't as open to my practice as I would like. Since moving in, I keep seeing a blonde-haired woman in the common area. This spirit doesn't seem negative, but I've kept my guard up and done my protection sigils on the door to my room. This spirit also seems to only come around when my roommate is gone, and has shown itself to me at least every other day, if not every day. I've said numerous times about my boundaries, saying things that I have in the past when things like this happen, like, "This is my space, as if you do not respect it, please leave." I don't mean harm, I'm just trying to do insert task here. I'm not open for communication at this time, please leave me alone, etc. This seems to work as the spirit seems to back off and leave me alone. But as I've been at the apartment for a few days in a row without going to work, the spirit seems to be around more, and it's making me feel uneasy. I don't quite know what to do and want some outside opinions and advice on what else I could do to get this spirit to leave me alone. I haven't talked to my roommate about it, as not to bring up any drama or stress between us. We get along well enough, just don't bring up things like this because of our different religious views, as that's the only real thing we clash on. I don't have any pictures of the spirit, as I get an uneasy feeling as well when I think about getting a photo of them. I can describe what the spirit looks like though, as I've seen them on multiple occasions just standing around. The spirit looks female, long blonde hair, about to the mid, back and ribs area, lengthwise. Pale, fair skin, and I've seen them wearing a white top and ripped blue jeans and blue shorts. This is a story that happened in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. My wife and I moved in sometime in September 2014. We bought the home at auction, and it needed a lot of work. The home was built in 1969 and it was an all original to that date, even down to the shag carpets. The house sat on 12 acres, with only 3 acres cleared around the home other than some random trees, but the rest was fully wooded. The basement was gross and musty. The ceilings were low in places, with the pipes and ductwork running throughout. It had an odd, strange feeling when walking down there. The previous owners left a deep freezer, and what they had inside of it made me question the things they were doing in the basement. The freezer was full of different animal carcasses that had been stripped of meat, random bone pieces with bits of fur still attached. There was also a gallon bucket sitting in there full of blood. Our very first night staying there, my brother and sister decided to stay over with us. We were all hanging out anyway, and it got late, so they decided to stay. While we were there, we were unpacking boxes and decorating for Halloween. I started walking the empty boxes and totes down to the basement. And while down there, something caught my eye. I saw what looked like a slim box sitting on top of the ductwork. I walked over and pulled the box down, and sure enough, it was an old 70s Ouija board. Not thinking too much about it, I grabbed it and brought it upstairs and sat in our dining room, hunched for decoration. The night was getting late. We were all getting tired. It had to have been around midnight. We decided to head up to the second floor and go to bed. All the bedrooms were dispersed on the second floor. My wife and I took the master bedroom, and my brother and sister took rooms of their own. We laid there trying to doze off, when suddenly we heard what sounded like closet doors sliding and slamming shut, and the sound of running and stomping back and forth in the hallway. My wife had me get up to tell my brother and sister to stop, that we were trying to sleep. I'd get up and go to each of their rooms and ask, "What are you guys doing? We're trying to sleep." And in their words, they said, "I thought that was you guys." I decided to grab my gun thinking, okay, maybe someone broke into the house. I slowly walked downstairs, clearing each room as I went along. My wife, brother and sister followed behind with a gun of their own. We cleared every room and there was no one in the house. Suddenly, it dawned on my sister. It's the Ouija board. I quickly grabbed it from the hutch cabinet and took it back to the basement. It was silent for the rest of the night. As time went on, the spirit was making itself known. We would have to block the basement door shut because we were constantly finding it open. Anytime we had to go down into the basement, we felt its presence. It was demonic. We were hearing it walking up to the second floor, walking around the bedrooms. Doors would randomly slam shut. The lights would surge randomly. I began seeing a dark shadow figure. It wasn't just any spirit, it was a dark spirit. It felt demonic. I felt like I was losing my mind. Voices were constantly in my head. Sometimes they were whispers. Other times they were louder, but always sounded muffled. I couldn't ever make out what they were saying, but it was all the time. The only time the voices weren't in my head was when I wasn't alone. We had chickens and a sheep that died for no reason. All of our vehicles constantly had problems, including our mower. One day, I was putting laundry away. I had the windows open to catch a summer breeze because our HVAC didn't work very well, and I heard a strange sound, so I looked out the window and listened. It was coming from the right side inside the woods. It got closer and closer, and that's when I saw it. It was either a hellhound or a werewolf walking through our front yard and disappearing into the woods on the other side. I was so shocked to see it. One random night, we were watching a movie. A light surged, and we heard the basement door slowly opening. I jumped up and wedged the door shut with a chair. Another night, I walked past the basement door to find it open, no lights on, and I hear my wife down there calling my name. I thought it was strange, so I didn't walk down there. I then heard walking above me. I slowly walk upstairs to the second floor. I make my way upstairs and turn the corner to find my wife in our room. I told her how I heard her voice calling my name from the basement. What did it wasn't me down in the basement? The presence continued and it was making us feel on edge. Tired. I was hardly sleeping. I tossed and turned and the voices grew louder and louder. Yet I could never make out what they were saying. After a few years,
we decided to put the house up for sale. My father-in-law was over helping work on a few things before the house hit the market. While he was there, doors slammed shut and the voices started to enter his mind. He even said he couldn't make out what they were saying. Eventually we moved out. The voices went away.